More and more Americans are packing up, leaving the US for Mexico. But why? Is it really just about the cost of living or something bigger happening? What is pulling people in and what are they leaving behind? A few months ago, I started noticing a trend online. In Facebook groups, forums, and YouTube comments. More and more people weren't just talking about visiting Mexico, they were thinking about moving there permanently. And these weren't just retirees. I saw young professionals, remote workers, and even families looking into it. Some were frustrated with the rent prices, others couldn't keep up with healthcare costs, and some just wanted a different pace of life. But that's what made me wonder, what's actually driving this movement? What's really happening to make Americans rethink where they live? Do they actually save money and live better? And what does this mean for the future? If more Americans keep moving, how will this affect both America and Mexico? It all starts with one thing: money. The cost of living in the US has become unbearable, especially in major cities like New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Rent is skyrocketing to the point where even basic one-bedroom apartments can eat up more than half of somebody's. Groceries aren't far behind. Just the essentials like milk, eggs, meat are getting more expensive by the day, making even a simple trip to the store feel like a financial burden. And then there's healthcare. Don't even get me started. Even with insurance, people are drowning in medical bills. A simple trip to the ER could cost thousands. Prescription medications that cost pennies elsewhere are outrageously priced in the US. For those without solid insurance, one medical emergency could mean financial ruin. And the problem isn't just about expenses. People are working harder than ever. Long hours, multiple jobs, stuck in a constant hustle, and still struggling to make ends meet. There's a sense of burnout, frustration, and hopelessness. It's not just about wanting a better life anymore. For many, it's about survival. So what do people do when they feel like the system is against them? They start looking for alternatives. And that's where Mexico comes in. Mexico offers something that's become harder to find in the US. Affordability, rent is cheaper, healthcare is accessible, and groceries could cost a lot less. For a lot of Americans, moving isn't just a dream. It's starting to look like a realistic solution. So why are Americans choosing Mexico over other countries? Well, first of all, it's pretty close. It's right next door. You don't have to fly halfway across the world to start a new life. A flight from Mexico City to most major cities in the US just takes a few hours, and in many cases, it's cheaper than flying from one state to another. That means if you ever have to visit family, handle business back home, or just want the flexibility to travel, Mexico can make it easy. And let's be real, who wouldn't trade sky-high rent for sunshine, tacos, and affordable living? But beyond convenience, Mexico offers something that's harder to find in the US: affordability. Rent is a lot cheaper, even in major cities like Mexico City or Guadalajara. In smaller towns like Merida or Oaxaca, you can find a nice place to live for the price of a cheap studio in the US. Groceries? They're fresher and cost way less. A trip to the local market can get you a week's worth of high quality produce. Meat and dairy for what you'd pay for a single bag of groceries in the US. And eating out? A full meal at a good restaurant could cost the same as just a tip on a dinner bill in the US. Why work yourself to death just to afford rent when you can be eating fresh ceviche by the beach for half the cost? And then there's healthcare. In Mexico, even private healthcare is affordable. A doctor's visit that would cost hundreds in the US might be the equivalent of $20 or $30. Medications that require insurance or a long approval process in the US are often available over the counter for a fraction of the price. For many Americans, healthcare alone is the reason they consider moving. Entertainment, day-by-day life are also more accessible. People find they can go out more, enjoy themselves, and travel more within Mexico, and have an active social life without worrying about their budget. And because the cost of living is lower, a lot of people finally feel like they can undo their button on their jeans and just relax and breathe. They're not constantly stressed out about money. At some point, you have to ask yourself, am I working to live or just living to work? But is it really that simple? Can you just pack up and go? Well, a lot of people are finding out the answer is yes. But there are a few things you need to know first. Moving to another country isn't like switching zip codes. It takes planning, there are visas, cultural differences, and yes, you might need to brush up on your Spanish. Or at least learn to order tacos properly. So before you start packing your bags, let's talk about what it actually takes to move to Mexico and make it work. Alright, so let's say you take the leap. You pack your bags, book a ticket, find a place, and settle in. What's life actually like? Do you wake up to the sound of mariachi bands every morning? And is every meal tacos and tequila? Well, not exactly. But here's what people who've made the move are actually saying. Less stress, more freedom, and a higher quality of life. Instead of worrying about rent increases, they're saving money. Instead of spending half on their paycheck on groceries, they're eating fresh local food at a fraction of the price. And instead of grinding through an exhausting work week just to survive, they're actually living, spending time with friends, and going to the beach, and exploring new places. Also feeling like their paycheck finally goes somewhere. And let's talk about Mexican food for 1 second. Because in the US, eating healthy can cost you an arm and a leg, organic this, gluten-free that, overpriced farmers market. But in Mexico, fresh fruits, high quality meats, and local sourced produce are not just affordable, they're the norm. So instead of budgeting for one sad whole food salad a week, people are enjoying daily fresh meals without breaking the bank. Now, of course, I'm not saying it's all sunshine and margaritas. Nothing is. Moving to another country isn't like flipping a switch. It comes with challenges. Learning a new language, yeah, that takes effort. Adjusting to cultural differences, that's part of the deal. And dealing with visa requirements, not the most exciting thing in the world. But here's the thing. Most people who make the move say the trade-off is completely worth it. Would you rather struggle to afford life in a country where you were born in? Or build a better, more affordable life somewhere new? That's a real question. And for thousands of Americans, Mexico has been the answer. Now here's a big question. What's happening if the trend keeps growing? What does it mean for both Mexico and the US if more and more Americans decide to pack up and leave? We're looking at a full-blown migration shift. Or is this just a temporary escape for people trying to outrun high cost and burnout? Because let's be real, this isn't just a few retirees looking for warm weather anymore. This is families, young professionals, digital nomads, and entire communities of people deciding that the American dream just isn't working for them. And if this trend continues, it could reshape both countries in ways no one saw coming. First, what about Mexico? Right now, the country is welcoming expats with open arms. But will it always be this way? Some areas, like Mexico City and Playa del Carmen, are always seeing major shifts. Rising rents, gentrification, and growing divide between local wages and the influx of foreign money. Could we see a new residency restrictions? Higher visa requirements? Maybe even limits on how many expats can live in certain areas? It's not out of the question. And what about the US? If Americans are leaving not just for an adventure, but because they can't afford to live in their own country, what does that say about where things are headed? If the cost of rent, healthcare, and basic necessities keep pushing people out, who's left behind? What happens when everyday Americans realize they have better options outside of the US? These are big questions, and the answers could change everything. We are watching the beginning of a long-term shift, where more Americans start living globally instead of feeling stuck in one place. Or will things in the US have to change to stop people from leaving? One thing's for sure, the movement isn't slowing down anytime soon. So is American dream still alive? Maybe, but for a lot of people, it's looking very different than it used to. People aren't just moving to Mexico because it's cheaper. They're moving because life here feels better. They're realizing that they don't have to work themselves to exhaustion just to afford rent, which means they don't have to spend their days stuck in a cycle of bills, work, and burnout. If you're serious about making the move to Mexico, come join my brand new Discord community. I created it just for people like you. Whether you're planning to move, already live in Mexico, or just curious about expat life, it's easy to join. Just type the word Mexico in the comments and I'll send you the link. Mexico isn't for everyone. Some people love the idea of living in Mexico, but others worry about things like safety, culture shock, or adjusting to a different lifestyle. And that's totally understandable. Moving to another country is a huge decision and it's not for everyone. That's why it's important to do your research and separate facts from fear-mongering. Still worried about safety? Watch this next. The media makes Mexico sound like a danger zone. But how much of this is real and how much is just hype? If you want the honest truth about safety in Mexico, check it out. Click it now and I'll see you there.